Margaret Chen had always believed in the power of careful planning. At 72, she had weathered the death of her beloved husband Robert 3 years prior, navigated the complexities of grief, and slowly begun to rebuild her life with the methodical precision that had served her well as a retired accountant. The modest inheritance from Robert's life insurance, combined with their carefully saved nest egg, had given her options she'd never expected to have in her golden years. According to YouTube analytics, 99.3% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. The house on Maple Street had caught her eye during one of her solitary weekend drives through the neighborhoods she'd once dreamed of living in. It was a charming two-story colonial with a wraparound porch, mature oak trees, and a garden that whispered promises of spring blooms. More importantly, it was in the same school district where her 6-year-old granddaughter Emma would be starting first grade in the fall. Margaret had kept the purchase entirely secret, not from malice, but from a desire to surprise her son David and his wife Sarah with the ultimate gift. A beautiful home where they could build their future, where Emma could grow up in safety and comfort, and where Margaret herself could finally live close enough to be the hands-on grandmother she'd always wanted to be. The closing had been smooth, handled through her longtime attorney William Hayes, who had helped her and Robert with their estate planning years before. The house was purchased outright. No mortgage, no monthly payments, just a clean deed with Margaret's name on it. She'd planned to reveal the surprise at Emma's 7th birthday party in 2 weeks, imagining their joy and gratitude as she handed over the keys to their dream home. But dreams, Margaret would learn, could shatter as easily as glass. It was a Tuesday afternoon when she decided to check on the property one more time before the big reveal. She had a key made and wanted to walk through the empty rooms, perhaps take some measurements for furniture placement. As her Honda Civic turned into the driveway, she was surprised to see Sarah's silver SUV parked there, along with another car she didn't recognize. Margaret's first thought was confusion rather than alarm. Perhaps Sarah had driven by and noticed the sold sign. Maybe she was curious about who had bought the house in what would soon be her neighborhood. She parked behind the unfamiliar car and made her way to the front door, fishing for her keys. But the door was already open. Voices drifted from inside, Sarah's familiar laugh mixed with others she didn't recognize. Margaret hesitated at the threshold, her hand still on the doorknob. Something about the tone, the casual familiarity of the voices, made her pause. "The master bedroom is perfect for Mom and Dad," Sarah was saying as Margaret quietly stepped into the foyer. "They'll love the ensuite bathroom, and Emma can have the room overlooking the backyard." Margaret's blood ran cold. Mom and Dad, Sarah's parents. "The kitchen will need some updating," came another voice. Female, older, with the same cadence as Sarah's speech. "But the bones are good." "Sarah, honey, you've done so well finding this place." "I know." Sarah's voice was bright with excitement. "David doesn't know yet. But I've been working with a realtor friend for months. The previous owners were some elderly couple, and they were motivated to sell. We got it for almost $40,000 under asking price." Margaret gripped the doorframe, her knuckles white. $40,000 under asking price. She had paid full asking price, in cash, 2 months ago. "And David's mother will never know," Sarah continued, and Margaret's heart stopped entirely. "She's been making noises about wanting to move closer to Emma, but honestly, the last thing we need is her breathing down our necks all the time. This way, Mom, you and Dad can move in here, help with Emma, and we'll all be together. David will see how much better it is to have you two helping instead of his interfering mother." The unfamiliar voice, Sarah's mother, Margaret realized, chuckled approvingly. "That woman has always been too involved. Remember when Emma was born? She practically moved into your hospital room." "Oh, don't get me started," Sarah said. "She still thinks she knows better than me about everything. How to feed Emma, how to dress her, how to discipline her. It'll be such a relief to have you here instead, Mom. You actually respect my choices as a parent. Margaret felt the walls of the house, her house, closing in around her. The surprise she had planned, the generous gift she had imagined giving, the future she had envisioned living close to her granddaughter, all of it crumbled into dust in a matter of moments. But it was Sarah's next words that ignited something dangerous in Margaret's chest. The best part is, David's mother has been talking about buying a house in the area. But with us already settled here, and with Mom and Dad helping with Emma, we can just tell her there's no room in Emma's life for two sets of grandparents living so close. She'll have to find somewhere else to meddle. Margaret backed silently out of the house, her hands shaking as she fumbled with her keys. She sat in her car for 10 minutes, staring at the steering wheel, as the magnitude of the betrayal washed over her. Sarah wasn't just ungrateful. She was actively plotting to keep Margaret away from Emma, while positioning her own parents as the primary grandparents. More than that, Sarah was claiming to own a house that Margaret had bought with her own money, her and Robert's life savings, their carefully preserved nest egg that was meant to secure their family's future. The drive home passed in a blur. Margaret pulled into her driveway and sat motionless for another 20 minutes, her mind racing. She had trusted Sarah implicitly. She had welcomed her into the family when David brought her home 8 years ago, had supported their marriage, had been present for Emma's birth, had babysat countless times, had given Sarah the benefit of the doubt during every small disagreement or tension. And this was how Sarah saw her: an interference, a problem to be managed and excluded. That evening, Margaret called her attorney. "William," she said when he answered, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "I need to ask you about the house on Maple Street. Is there any way someone else could claim ownership of it?" "Margaret, you own that house free and clear. The deed is in your name. The purchase was legitimate, and all paperwork was filed properly with the county. Why do you ask?" She explained what she had overheard, carefully and precisely. William was quiet for a long moment. "Margaret, I'm sorry to say this, but it sounds like your daughter-in-law may be planning some form of fraud. If she's telling people she owns a house that belongs to you, that could be a serious legal matter." "What are my options?" "Well, you could confront her directly. You could involve your son, or ... quote. William paused. "You could let this play out and see exactly what she's planning to do. Sometimes it's better to know the full scope of someone's deception before you act." Margaret hung up and spent the night staring at the ceiling, her mind churning with possibilities. By morning, her course was clear. She would let Sarah's plan unfold. She would watch and wait and gather evidence. And when the time was right, she would ensure that Sarah faced the consequences of her betrayal in the most public and devastating way possible. Over the next 10 days, Margaret became a detective in her own family's drama. She drove by the house daily, noting when Sarah's car was there, when moving trucks appeared, when Sarah's parents' car from Michigan joined the regular parade of vehicles in the driveway. She watched furniture being moved in, furniture that looked suspiciously like pieces from Sarah and David's current apartment. She also began testing Sarah directly, in small ways that revealed the depth of the deception. "Sarah, dear," Margaret said during their weekly coffee date, "have you and David given any more thought to buying a house? The market is so competitive right now." Sarah's eyes lit up with what Margaret now recognized as calculated performance. "Actually, we've been looking. David's been so busy with work that I've been doing most of the house hunting myself. I think I might have found something perfect, but I want it to be a surprise for him." "How exciting! What neighborhood?" "Oh, just somewhere with good schools for Emma. You know how important her education is to us." Margaret smiled and nodded, filing away another piece of evidence. Sarah was planning to present the house to David as her own discovery, her own achievement. "David, trusting and busy with his job at the engineering firm, would never think to question how his wife had managed to secure a house that should have been well beyond their financial means. The most damaging evidence came on day 8 of Margaret's surveillance. She had parked across the street from the house, watching Sarah's parents arrange furniture in what had been meant as Margaret's own future living room, when she saw David's car pull into the driveway. Margaret quickly started her car and drove to a position where she could see the front of the house but remain unnoticed. She watched through binoculars as Sarah rushed out to meet David, practically bouncing with excitement. Even from a distance, Margaret could see David's shock and confusion as Sarah led him into the house. She wished she could hear their conversation, but David's body language told the story clearly enough. The bewildered gestures, the way he kept looking around as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The moment when Sarah must have told him it was theirs, because his posture went rigid with what looked like panic. David was clearly asking how they could afford such a house. Margaret watched Sarah gesture expansively, watched her take David's hands and pull him toward the house, watched her obvious reassurances and explanations. Whatever story Sarah was telling, it was compelling enough that David's rigid posture gradually relaxed into what looked like cautious joy. Margaret drove home with tears of rage burning her eyes. Her son, her honest, trusting, hard-working son, was being manipulated as thoroughly as she had been. Sarah wasn't just stealing from Margaret. She was positioning David as an unknowing accomplice in the theft. That night, Margaret finalized her plan. Emma's 7th birthday party was scheduled for Saturday afternoon at the community center near David and Sarah's apartment. Margaret had offered to help with decorations and had volunteered to give Emma her gift at the party. A gift she had told them would be something very special. She spent Friday evening preparing 3 envelopes. The first contained copies of all the paperwork related to the house purchase: the deed, the closing documents, the bank transfer records, everything that proved her ownership of the property. The second contained printed screenshots of text messages Sarah had sent to her mother, messages Margaret had obtained by asking her attorney to hire a private investigator for 1 day of electronic surveillance. The messages were damning, Sarah discussing the stupid old woman who doesn't know we're taking her house, and planning how to get rid of Margaret's interference permanently. The third envelope contained Margaret's new will, drafted by William Hayes and already filed with the court. In it, Margaret left everything: her savings, her investments, her insurance policies, and the house on Maple Street, to Emma, with the inheritance held in trust until Emma turned 25. David was named as trustee, but the will explicitly stated that Sarah was to have no access to or control over any of the funds or properties. Saturday arrived crisp and clear. Margaret dressed carefully in her best blue dress, the one Robert had always said brought out her eyes. She did her hair, put on her pearl earrings, and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked like someone's sweet grandmother. She looked harmless. She looked like someone who could be easily fooled and easily dismissed. Perfect. The community center was decorated with purple and pink balloons, Emma's favorite colors. 20 children ran around playing games while their parents clustered in groups, drinking coffee and making small talk. Emma, radiant in a sparkly purple dress, hugged Margaret tightly when she arrived. "Grandma Maggie! Did you bring my special surprise?" "I did, sweetheart. But we need to wait until after the cake, okay?" Margaret mingled with the other guests, accepted compliments on her beautiful granddaughter, and watched Sarah play the perfect hostess. Sarah was glowing with happiness, frequently touching David's arm and whispering things that made him smile. To anyone watching, they looked like the ideal young family, successful, loving, and excited about their future. Margaret waited until the cake was served and the presents were opened. Emma had received a bicycle, art supplies, books, and clothes from various family members and friends. She had squealed with delight at each gift, But Margaret noticed how she kept glancing toward her grandmother, clearly anticipating this special surprise. "All right, everyone," Margaret said finally, raising her voice to address the room. "I believe it's time for Emma's special gift." The room quieted, all eyes turning toward Margaret. She saw Sarah beam with anticipation, no doubt expecting Margaret to announce her intention to move to the neighborhood, walking right into the trap Sarah had prepared. "Emma, sweetheart," Margaret said, kneeling down to her granddaughter's level. "Your gift is actually something for your whole family. Something very important that I've been planning for a long time." She stood and pulled out the first envelope. "Sarah, David, I have some wonderful news to share with everyone. I've bought you a house." The room erupted in surprised exclamations and congratulations. Margaret watched Sarah's face cycle through confusion, shock, and then dawning horror as the implications sank in. "The house on Maple Street?" Margaret continued, her voice carrying clearly across the now silent room. "The beautiful colonial with the wraparound porch. I bought it 2 months ago as a surprise gift for my family." David's face went pale. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "We—" "Sarah found that house. We're buying it ourselves." Margaret smiled gently at her son. "Oh, sweetie, there seems to be some confusion. Let me show you the paperwork." She handed David the first envelope. As he opened it with trembling hands, Margaret continued addressing the room, her voice warm and grandmotherly. "You see, I wanted to surprise them, but it turns out Sarah has been planning her own surprise. She's been telling people that she bought the house herself. She's even been moving her parents into it." Margaret's voice remained sweet, but her words were precision strikes. "I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding." David was staring at the documents, his face cycling through a range of emotions. Around the room, conversations had stopped entirely. Everyone was watching the drama unfold. "The interesting thing," Margaret continued, still smiling, "is that Sarah has been making some very specific plans for this house. Plans that don't include me." She pulled out the second envelope and handed it to David. "These are text messages between Sarah and her mother, discussing how they were going to use my house to keep me away from Emma." The silence in the room was deafening. Margaret could hear the whistle of the coffee pot in the kitchen, the distant sound of traffic outside, the rapid breathing of several guests who were realizing they were witnessing a family implosion. Sarah had gone completely white. "Margaret, this is... You don't understand." "Oh, but I do understand," Margaret said, her voice still pleasant and conversational. "I understand that you've been planning to steal my house and use it to exclude me from my granddaughter's life. I understand that you've been lying to my son and manipulating him into believing he was buying a house that I had already purchased for him." She turned to address the room again. "The most heartbreaking part is that I bought this house because I wanted to be closer to Emma. I wanted to be the kind of grandmother who could pick her up from school, help with homework, attend every recital and game. But Sarah has been telling her parents that there's no room in Emma's life for two sets of grandparents." Margaret could see several of the other parents exchanging shocked glances. In their community, grandparents were treasured, and the idea of deliberately excluding a loving grandmother was genuinely scandalous. David was reading the text messages, his face growing darker with each line. "Sarah," he said quietly, "what the hell is this?" Sarah looked around the room desperately, as if searching for an escape route. "David, please, let's talk about this privately." "No," David said, his voice rising. "No, I want to understand this right here, right now. Mom bought us a house, and you've been lying to me about it? You've been moving your parents into a house that doesn't belong to us?" "The house belongs to all of us," Sarah said desperately. "I was trying to make it work for everyone." Margaret pulled out the third envelope. "Actually, Sarah, the house belongs to Emma now." She handed the envelope to David. My new will, filed yesterday. Everything I own, including the house on Maple Street, now belongs to Emma. It's held in trust until she's 25, with David as the trustee. The will specifically states that you, Sarah, have no access to or control over any of it. The room erupted in murmurs and whispers. Margaret could see some of the guests pulling out their phones, no doubt texting friends about the drama they were witnessing. Sarah's face was now bright red, a combination of humiliation and rage. "You can't do this! You're trying to destroy my family!" "I'm protecting my family," Margaret replied calmly, "from someone who was trying to steal from us and manipulate us." Emma, who had been watching the adult conversation with wide, confused eyes, suddenly spoke up. "Grandma Maggie, are you not going to live near us anymore?" Margaret's heart broke at the question. She knelt down again, taking Emma's small hands in hers. "I want to live near you very much, sweetheart. I bought that house so I could be close to you, but your mommy doesn't want me to be close to you." "That's not true," Sarah burst out. "Emma, don't listen to her. She's being mean." Emma looked back and forth between the adults, tears forming in her eyes. "I want Grandma Maggie to live close to us. I want to see her every day." David stood up slowly, the papers still in his hands. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried clearly across the room. "Sarah, we need to go home. Now. We need to figure out what the hell you've done to our family." "David, please." "No. We're done here." David looked at his mother, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and devastation. "Mom, I don't know what to say. I had no idea." Margaret nodded. "I know you didn't, sweetheart. We'll figure this out." As David took Emma's hand and started to lead his family out of the community center, Sarah turned back to Margaret with undisguised hatred. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You've destroyed everything. Emma will hate you for this when she understands what you've done." Margaret looked at her daughter-in-law, her former daughter-in-law, she supposed, with cool assessment. "Emma will understand that I protected her inheritance from someone who was trying to steal it. She'll understand that I bought her a house because I love her, and that you tried to use my love against me." Sarah stormed out, leaving Margaret standing in a room full of shocked party guests and scattered birthday decorations. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Within a week, Sarah's parents had been evicted from the house by court order. Sarah and David's marriage, built on a foundation that Sarah had undermined with lies and manipulation, began to crumble immediately. David moved into the house on Maple Street temporarily while he and Sarah worked through divorce proceedings. Margaret found herself in an unexpected position. The house she had bought as a gift was now a refuge for her son and granddaughter. But it was also a crime scene of sorts, the place where she had learned the true nature of someone she had trusted. 3 months after the birthday party, Margaret sat on the wraparound porch of the house, on Maple Street, watching Emma play in the front yard while David worked in the garden. The divorce had been finalized the previous week. Sarah had moved back to Michigan with her parents, taking nothing but her personal belongings. David had been awarded primary custody of Emma, with Sarah receiving supervised visitation rights that she had yet to exercise. "Mom," David said, looking up from the flower bed he was planting, "I still can't believe what Sarah did. How did I not see it?" Margaret sipped her iced tea and watched Emma chase a butterfly across the lawn. "Love makes us trust, sweetheart. That's not a bad thing, usually. But the house. Mom, this is too much. I can't accept a house from you." Margaret smiled. "You're not accepting it. Emma owns it. You're just the trustee, remember? And she's already decided that she wants me to live here too." It was true. Emma had announced, with the gravity that only a 7-year-old could muster, that the house was big enough for everyone who loved her, and that meant Grandma Maggie had to live there too. David had tried to explain that grown-ups didn't usually live together like that, but Emma had dismissed his concerns with a wave of her hand. "The house has enough bedrooms," she had said practically. "And Grandma Maggie can help me with my homework, and Daddy can cook dinner, and we can all watch movies together. It's perfect." And somehow, it was. Margaret had sold her old house and moved into the master bedroom on the first floor of the Maple Street house. David and Emma had the upstairs bedrooms. They had settled into a routine that felt natural and comfortable. David handling work and household maintenance, Margaret managing errands and helping with Emma's school activities, both of them sharing cooking and childcare duties. The revenge Margaret had planned had been complete and devastating, but the aftermath had brought an unexpected gift. She was closer to Emma than she had ever imagined possible, and she had a front row seat to her granddaughter's daily life in a way that would never have happened if Sarah's original plan had succeeded. 6 months after the birthday party, Margaret received a letter forwarded from her old address. It was from Sarah. "Margaret, I know you think you won, but you destroyed a family. Emma asks about me every day, and David is struggling to raise her alone. You got what you wanted. You're the primary grandmother now. I hope it was worth it." Sarah Margaret read the letter twice, then walked outside to where Emma was practicing riding her new bicycle in the driveway, David jogging alongside her with encouraging words. She thought about Sarah's accusation, that she had destroyed a family, but as she watched David's face light up with pride when Emma successfully rode a full circle without falling, as she heard Emma's laughter echoing off the houses in their quiet neighborhood, Margaret knew that wasn't true. Sarah had tried to destroy their family by lying, stealing, and manipulating. Margaret had simply refused to let it happen. The bicycle wobbled, and Emma squealed with delight as she regained her balance. David caught Margaret's eye and grinned, giving her a thumbs up. This was what family looked like. This was what love looked like. This was what Margaret had fought for, and it had been worth every moment of the battle. As the sun set over Maple Street, Margaret Chen sat on her wraparound porch, listening to the sounds of her granddaughter's laughter and her son's voice, surrounded by the life she had protected and the future she had secured. The house she had bought in secret had become the foundation of a new kind of family, one built on truth instead of lies, on protection instead of manipulation, and on love that didn't need to be stolen because it was freely given. The revenge had been sweet, but the aftermath was even sweeter.